First contact with Terror Commander Alina Vasquez had been staring at the same star charts for 3 hours when the emergency klaxon shattered the peaceful quiet of Titan Defense Station. The coffee in her ceramic mug rippled as the massive station's hull vibrated with the urgent warning. Around her, the command center erupted into controlled chaos as officers rushed to their positions, their faces illuminated by the red warning lights that bathed everything in an ominous glow. "Commander, we have an unidentified vessel approaching Sector 7, called out Lieutenant Sarah Kim from her position at the sensor array. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface as streams of data cascaded down her screens. It's broadcasting on multiple frequencies, but the signal is badly degraded. Alina set down her mug and walked briskly to the central command platform, her boots clicking against the polished metal floor. Through the massive viewport that dominated the station's command center, she could see the rings of Saturn spinning slowly in the distance, their ice particles catching the distant light of Sol. It had been 2 years since humanity's first official contact with alien species, but encounters like this still sent adrenaline coursing through her veins. "What's the condition of the vessel?" Alina asked, studying the tactical display that materialized in front of her. The ship appeared as a pulsing red dot on the three-dimensional map, its trajectory erratic and concerning. "Severe damage across multiple hull sections," reported Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez from his engineering station. "I'm reading massive power fluctuations and what looks like catastrophic system failures." "Commander, this ship is barely holding." Together, Alina nodded grimly. In her 15 years of military service, she had seen plenty of distress calls, but something about this situation felt different. The alien vessel was unlike anything in the databases they had compiled since first contact. Its organic curves and crystalline protrusions suggested a technology base completely foreign to human understanding. "Any response to our hails?" she asked. "Negative, Commander. But I'm detecting faint life signs aboard the vessel. Whatever's left of their communication system seems to be trying to establish contact." Alina made her decision quickly. "Activate the emergency medical bay and prep a boarding team. If we can establish communication, I want to know what happened to them, and get me a direct line to Earth Command. I need to know about this." As the station's crew worked to assist the damaged alien ship, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would be different from the peaceful first contacts humanity had experienced before. The level of damage on the vessels suggested violence on a scale that made her stomach tighten with apprehension. 20 minutes later, the alien ship limped into the station's docking bay. Guided by gentle tractor beams and the expertise of the station's navigation team, Alina watched from the observation deck as teams of technicians and medical personnel swarmed around the vessel, their movements precise and professional, despite the obvious excitement of working with completely unknown technology. The ship itself was beautiful in a way that human vessels rarely achieved. Its hull seemed to flow like liquid metal frozen in time, with structures that resembled coral growths rather than traditional engineering. But the beauty was marred by terrible wounds, great tears in the hull that exposed twisted metal and darkened passages within. Commander Lieutenant Kim's voice crackled through the communication system. "We've established basic communication protocols. The surviving occupant is requesting immediate audience with our leadership. They're calling themselves Ambassador Thane of the Kalahari Republic." Alina felt her pulse quicken. Ambassador meant this was official diplomatic contact, not just a random encounter with alien travelers. She quickly made her way to the medical bay, where she found a creature that took her breath away. Ambassador Thane stood nearly 7 feet tall, with skin that seemed to shimmer between blue and silver depending on the light. Their features were elegant and refined, with large expressive eyes that held an intelligence Alina could immediately recognize. But what struck her most was the expression of desperate hope mixed with barely contained terror that dominated the ambassador's face. "Commander Vasquez," Thane spoke in accented but clear English, their voice carrying a musical quality that reminded Alina of wind chimes. "I bring greetings from the Kalahari Republic, though I fear they come at the darkest hour our people have ever known." Alina stepped forward, extending her hand in the universal gesture of greeting she had learned during first contact protocols. Ambassador Thane, welcome to Titan Station. We're honored by your presence, but I can see that you've endured tremendous hardship. What happened to your ship? Thane's large eyes filled with what Alina recognized as tears, though they glowed with a faint luminescence, unlike human tears. Our convoy was attacked 3 days ago by ships of the Zephyrian Dominion. Of the 12 vessels that left our homeworld, only mine survived, and barely so. My people are dying, Commander, and we have come to you because we have nowhere else to turn. The weight of those words settled over Alina like a cold blanket. She had studied the preliminary reports on various alien species encountered by human exploration teams. But the Zephyrian Dominion was mentioned only in whispered warnings from other aliens. A conquering empire that expanded through brutal subjugation. Tell me what happened, Alina said gently, guiding Thane to a chair in the medical bay's consultation room. Thane's account painted a picture of horror that Alina struggled to fully comprehend. The Kalahari were apparently a peaceful species, whose greatest achievements lay in healing arts and environmental restoration. Their worlds were paradises of biological harmony, where disease had been eliminated and every citizen lived in comfort and peace. We have never maintained a military in the way other species understand the term, Thane explained, their voice growing stronger as they spoke. Our ships are designed for exploration and aid, not warfare. When the Zephyrian fleets arrived at our border worlds, we tried to negotiate, to understand what they wanted from us. What did they want? Lena asked, though she feared she already knew the answer. Everything, Thane replied simply. Our worlds, our technology, our people as slave labor. The Zephyrian Dominion expands by consuming everything in its path. They gave us one choice: submit completely or be destroyed. Alina felt anger building in her chest, a hot flame that made her hands clench involuntarily. How many worlds have they taken? 7 of our 15 systems have fallen in the past 6 months. The others are under siege. Our defensive capabilities were never designed for military conflict. We had perhaps 50 ships that could even theoretically be used for combat, and most of those were destroyed in the first weeks of the invasion. The scope of the catastrophe began to sink in. Alina tried to imagine Earth facing a similar threat, entire human colonies being systematically conquered and enslaved. The thought made her feel sick. You mentioned that you have nowhere else to turn, Alina said carefully. We approached other species for assistance. Thane's expression became even more pained. We have petitioned 23 different species for military aid, Commander. Every single one has refused. Some expressed sympathy, but claimed they lacked the strength to face the Zephyrian fleets. Others simply stated that involvement would bring the Dominion's attention to their own worlds. Alina sat back in her chair, processing this information. 23 species had turned away from a civilization being systematically destroyed. The politics of the galactic community were apparently far more complex and ruthless than humanity. Had realized, "Why have you come to us?" Alina asked. Humanity is still new to the galactic community. We don't have established diplomatic relationships with most species. For the first time since arriving, something approaching hope appeared in Thane's eyes. Because the stories about humans have reached even our most remote systems, Commander. They say your species has an unusual approach to conflict resolution. They say you do not abandon those who seek your protection, regardless of the odds you face. Alina felt a chill run down her spine. Humanity's reputation was apparently spreading through the galaxy faster than she had realized. What exactly are you asking of us, Ambassador? Thane leaned forward, their luminescent tears flowing more freely now. I'm asking you to help us. Survive, Commander. Not to win this war for us, but simply to give my people a chance to escape or to make the Zephyrians hesitate long enough for others to reconsider their position. We need ships, Commander Vasquez. Even a small fleet might convince the Dominion that the cost of conquering our worlds has become too high. Alina stood and walked to the viewport, staring out at the vast expanse of space beyond the station. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization was being methodically destroyed while the galactic community watched and did nothing. The weight of Thane's request pressed down on her like gravity from a massive planet. How many ships are we talking about, Ambassador? Alina said quietly. Even 20 or 30 vessels would be more than we dared hope for, Thane replied. Enough to make the Zephyrians pause. perhaps enough to inspire other species to join a coalition against the Dominion. Alina turned back to face the alien ambassador. Seeing the desperate hope in those large, expressive eyes, in that moment, she made a decision that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of humanity forever. "Ambassador Thane," she said formally, "I'm going to contact Earth Command immediately. Your request will be heard by the highest levels of our government, and I give you my word that it will be considered with the seriousness it deserves." Thane rose from their chair, their entire body trembling with emotion. "Thank you, Commander. Even the possibility of hope is more than my people have had in months." As Alina left the medical bay to make the most important communication of her career, she had no idea that what the humans considered a small support fleet would soon shock the entire galaxy into a new understanding of what mercy could look like when backed by overwhelming force. The message she sent to Earth Command was simple: request immediate consultation on humanitarian military intervention. Alien species facing extinction-level threat. Recommend mobilization of rapid response fleet. What happened next would prove that sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy is a species that chooses to be kind. Humanity's hidden strength. Revealed Admiral Marcus Chen stood in the war room beneath the Colorado Mountains, surrounded by holographic displays showing ship positions throughout the entire solar system. The emergency session of the Terran Defense Council had been called within hours of Commander Vasquez's report, and the response had been swift and decisive. Around the massive circular table, humanity's top military leaders debated the scope of their intervention in the Kalahari crisis. "The situation is clear," Admiral Chen said, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years in the service. "We have a peaceful species facing extinction while the galactic community stands by and watches. This isn't just about the Kalahari anymore. This is about what kind of neighbors we want to be in this galaxy." General Patricia Morrison, head of the Colonial Defense Force, leaned forward in her chair. "Marcus, we're talking about intervening. In an alien war against an empire that has apparently conquered multiple star systems, are we certain we understand what we're getting ourselves into?" Defense Secretary Williams, a civilian who had overseen humanity's rapid military expansion since first contact, pulled up tactical assessments on his personal display. "According to our intelligence analysis, the Zephyrian Dominion operates approximately 1,200 combat vessels across their conquered territories. They've been expanding steadily for decades, using overwhelming force against species that lack significant military capabilities." Admiral Chen nodded grimly. "Which means they've never faced an opponent that could match their fleet strength. Their tactical doctrine is built around intimidation and numerical superiority against peaceful civilizations." "How many ships are we talking about deploying?" asked Fleet Admiral Rodriguez, commander of the Outer System Defenses. Chen considered the question carefully. Ambassador Thane mentioned that even 20 or 30 ships would exceed their hopes. "I think we can do better than that. I'm recommending a rapid response deployment of 3 fleet groups with full support elements." Room fell silent as the military leaders processed this information. A rapid response deployment of 3 fleet groups represented a significant commitment of resources, but it was hardly the full extent of human military capability. Back on Titan Station, Ambassador Thane watched in growing amazement as the human response unfolded around them. Within 12 hours of their arrival, the station had transformed into a hive of activity that defeated their understanding of how military operations typically functioned. Ambassador Commander Vasquez said, joining Thane in the observation lounge where they had been watching ship movements through the massive viewport. "I wanted to update you on our response to your request." Thane turned from the window, their luminescent eyes wide with curiosity. "Commander, I have been observing the activity around your station with great interest. The number of vessels arriving seems substantial for a support mission." Elena smiled, an expression that Thane was learning to associate with humans who were pleased about something. "We'd like to be thorough when we're helping friends, Ambassador. Admiral Chen will be arriving shortly to discuss the mission parameters with you directly." Through the viewport, Thane could see dozens of human ships moving in precise formations around the station. The vessels were unlike anything they had encountered in their diplomatic travels throughout the galaxy, where most species built ships For specific purposes, human vessels seem designed for multiple roles with an emphasis on capability rather than specialization. Commander Thane said carefully, "May I ask how many ships will be part of this support mission?" Elena's smile widened slightly. "That's something Admiral Chen will discuss with you in detail, but I can tell you that we're taking your people's situation very seriously." What Thane didn't know was that very seriously in human military terms translated to mobilization on a scale that would have impressed even the most warlike species in the galaxy. Throughout the solar system, hidden bases and disguised installations were coming online for the first time since their construction. On Europa, beneath the ice-covered surface, Fleet Base Poseidon opened its massive hangar doors for the first time in 2 years. Ships that had been maintained in perfect readiness began emerging from their concealed berths, their crews reporting for duty with an efficiency that spoke to years of preparation. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim, recently transferred from Titan, stationed to serve as Admiral Chen's intelligence liaison, reviewed the fleet composition reports with growing amazement, even though she was human herself. "Sir," she said to Admiral Chen as his flagship approached Titan Station, "the response from all sectors has exceeded our initial projections. We're looking at a deployment significantly larger than originally planned." Admiral Chen, a compact man with steel-gray hair and eyes that seemed to miss nothing, studied the reports on his command display. "How significantly larger, Commander?" "Well, sir, when word spread that we were conducting a humanitarian intervention, volunteer requests from ship commanders throughout the system began pouring in. Instead of 3 fleet groups, we're now looking at 12 full battle groups plus support elements." Chen raised an eyebrow. It wasn't unusual for human military personnel to volunteer for missions they believed in. But this level of response indicated something deeper. "How many ships total?" 4,267. "Combat vessels, sir?" "Plus nearly 2,000 support ships." Chen was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. "Commander, what we're assembling here isn't a support mission anymore. This is the largest fleet humanity has ever deployed." "Yes, sir." "Should I send orders to scale back the deployment?" Chen considered the question while staring out at the growing fleet around them. Ships continued arriving from throughout the solar system, some emerging from bases so secret that even he had forgotten they existed. The hidden military infrastructure that humanity had been building since first contact was revealing itself. "For the first time, no," he said finally. "If we're going to make a statement about humanity's position in the galaxy, let's make sure it's a clear one." Ambassador Thane's meeting with Admiral Chen took place in Titan Station's main conference room with Commander Vasquez and several human military officials present. The ambassador had spent hours trying to prepare for this discussion, but nothing could have readied them for the revelation that was about to unfold. Ambassador Thane, Admiral Chen began formally. "First, please accept humanity's condolences for the losses your people have suffered. What the Zephyrian Dominion is doing to the Kalahari Republic represents exactly the kind of aggression that the galactic community should unite against." Thane inclined their head gracefully. "Thank you, Admiral. Your compassion honors both our species." "I want to discuss the specifics of our military response to your situation," Chen continued. "You mentioned that even 20 or 30 ships would exceed your expectations for assistance." "Yes, Admiral. We understand that humanity is still establishing itself in the galactic community. We would be grateful for any support you can provide." Chen activated a holographic display that filled the center of the conference room with a 3-dimensional representation of the solar system. Red dots began appearing throughout the display, each representing a human vessel. "Ambassador, I want you to understand the scope of what we're prepared to commit to this mission." As the display updated, more and more red dots appeared until the entire solar system seemed to pulse with activity. Thane stared in growing shock as the numbers climbed past 100 ships, then past 1,000. Admiral Thane said, "There." Voice barely a whisper. "How many vessels are you showing me?" "The current deployment consists of 4,267 combat vessels with full support elements," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "This represents our rapid response capability for humanitarian interventions." Thane's legs gave out and they fell back into their chair, staring at the display with an expression of complete disbelief. 4,000 ships? Yes, though I should clarify that this is not our primary fleet, Ambassador. This is what we can deploy quickly. For emergencies, our main defensive forces remain stationed throughout human space. The Kelhari ambassador looked from the display to Admiral Chen, then to Commander Vasquez, searching their faces for any sign that this was some kind of mistake or exaggeration. All they saw was calm professionalism, Admiral Thane said carefully. In our diplomatic surveys of this region of space, humanity was classified as a minor species with limited military capability. Our intelligence suggested you possessed perhaps a few hundred ships at most. Chen nodded understandingly. That's a reasonable assessment based on what we've chosen to reveal publicly. Humanity learned early in our history that appearing weak, while building strength, is often a successful survival strategy. Commander Vasquez leaned forward. Ambassador, may I ask what the total military strength of the Kelhari Republic was before the Zephyrian invasion? We had approximately 200 vessels that could be adapted for military use, Thane replied, still staring at the holographic display. The largest military fleet we had ever heard of belonged to the Andromedan Collective, with nearly 800 ships. The humans in the room exchanged glances that Thane was beginning to interpret as significant. Ambassador, Admiral Chen said gently, the fleet we're deploying to assist your people represents about 15% of humanity's total military capability. Thane stood up abruptly, their tall form trembling with shock. 15%? Admiral, are you telling me that humanity possesses a military force of nearly 30,000 ships? The exact numbers are classified, but that's not an unreasonable estimate, Chen replied. Well, I should point out that the vast majority of our vessels are designed for defensive operations and humanitarian missions like this one. The Kelhari ambassador walked to the conference room's viewport, staring out at the human ships that continued arriving around Titan Station. The sight that greeted them defied everything they thought they knew about the galaxy's balance of power. Sleek human destroyers moved in perfect formation alongside massive carriers that dwarfed anything in Kelhari experience. Support vessels the size of small cities glided between. Capital ships with their hulls bristling with advanced sensors and defensive systems. The entire fleet moved with precision that spoke to years of training and coordination. Why? Asked, turning back to face the human officers. Why have you hidden such strength? Why present yourselves as a minor species when you clearly possess the most powerful military force in known space? Admiral Chen stood and joined Thane at the viewport. Because, Ambassador, we learned something important in our species' history. The greatest strength isn't the ability to destroy your enemies. It's the wisdom to know when not to use that ability. We built this fleet not for conquest, but for moments exactly like this one, Commander Vasquez added. When peaceful people need protection from those who would destroy them. Thane felt tears streaming down their face as the full implications of humanity's response began to sink in. You're not just sending ships to help us. You're revealing the true extent of your military power to the entire galaxy. Yes, Chen said simply, because some things are worth that risk. The survival of your people is one of them. As the massive human fleet prepared to depart for Kelhari space, Ambassador Thane realized that their desperate plea for help had unleashed something that would change the galactic balance of power forever. The humans weren't just coming to save the Kelhari Republic. They were announcing to the universe that there was a new superpower in the galaxy, and it had chosen mercy as its defining characteristic. When mercy becomes the deadliest weapon, the Kelhari home system looked like a vision of hell painted across the stars. 3 of the 5 inhabited worlds showed the angry red glow of atmospheric fires, while streams of escape pods fled toward the outer planets like desperate fireflies against the darkness. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship Terras, resolve studying the tactical display with the calm expression of a man who had seen too much war in his lifetime. Sensor report, he commanded, his voice cutting through the quiet efficiency of the bridge crew. Sir, I'm reading approximately 900 Zephyrian vessels in system, reported Lieutenant Commander Kim from her station. They have orbital bombardment. Platforms around all 3 inner worlds, and their main fleet is positioned to intercept any rescue attempts. Ambassador Thane stood beside Admiral Chen, their luminescent eyes reflecting the horror of watching their homeworld burn. Through the main viewport, they could see the twisted remains of Kalhari orbital stations drifting like broken flowers in the void. "Admiral," Thane whispered, "they're destroying everything. It's not just our military installations, but our hospitals. Our schools, our art galleries, are erasing our entire civilization." Chen placed a gentle hand on the ambassador's shoulder. "Not while we're here. They're not." On the Zephyrian command ship, Eternal Conquest, Warprime Korthok studied his tactical displays with satisfaction. The tall reptilian commander had overseen the subjugation of dozens of species in the Kalhari were proving to be just as helpless as their reputation suggested. "Warprime," his sensor officer called out, "we're detecting unusual readings on the system's edge. Multiple contacts, unknown configuration." Korthok's scaled features showed annoyance rather than concern. In his 30 years of conquest, no species had ever dared interfere with Zephyrian expansion. Most aliens were too intelligent to challenge the Dominion's military supremacy. "How many contacts?" he asked, his voice carrying the harsh growl typical of his species. "Difficult to determine, Warprime. They appear to have advanced stealth capabilities. I'm counting at least... Wait." The sensor officer's voice changed, becoming uncertain. "Warprime, the computer is having difficulty processing all the contacts." For the first time in years, Korthok felt a flicker of something that might have been concern. He moved to the sensor station personally, staring at the displays with growing confusion. "Show me," he commanded. The main screen filled with a representation of the system's edge, where space itself seemed to be rippling and shifting. Then, like a curtain being drawn back, the human fleet revealed itself. The bridge of the Eternal. Conquest fell silent as thousands of contacts appeared on every screen. Ships materialized from apparently empty space in formations so vast that the Zephyrian computers struggled to count them all. "Warprime," the sensor officer said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I count over 4,000 enemy vessels." Korthok stared at the display, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. In all the history of Zephyrian expansion, they had never encountered a fleet even half this size. The largest coalition force ever assembled against them had consisted of perhaps 300 ships, and those had been swept aside within hours. "Are you certain of these numbers?" Korthok demanded. "Yes, Warprime. 267 combat vessels, plus nearly 2,000 support ships. They're moving into combat formation now. The Terra's resolve." Admiral Chen watched the Zephyrian fleet with tactical interest. Their ships were arranged in traditional aggressive formations, clearly designed for overwhelming smaller opponents through superior numbers and firepower. Admiral Commander Vasquez reported from her station, "The Zephyrian fleet is moving to intercept. They're broadcasting challenges on all frequencies." "Put them through," Chen ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing Warprime Korthok's reptilian features. His yellow eyes burned with fury and confusion as he glared at the human officers. "Unknown vessels," Korthok growled in accented but understandable galactic standard. "You are interfering in Zephyrian territory. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Admiral Chen stepped forward, his uniform crisp and his manner diplomatically polite. "Warprime Korthok, I am Admiral Marcus Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. We are here to provide humanitarian assistance to the Kalhari Republic. I would suggest that you are the one who should consider withdrawal." Korthok's laughter was a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. "Terran? I've never heard of your species. You will remove your ships from this system immediately, or they will be added to our victory count." "I'm afraid that's not going to happen," Chen replied calmly. "We are here under humanitarian protocols to protect civilian populations from illegal aggression. I am ordering you to cease all hostile actions against Kalhari civilians and withdraw your forces from their territory." "You dare threaten the Zephyrian Dominion?" Korthok snarled. "We've conquered 17 species. Our fleets have never known defeat." Admiral Chen's expression remained professionally calm. "Warprime, you should know that you are currently facing the combined humanitarian response fleet of the Terran Republic We have no desire for unnecessary bloodshed. We will not allow the systematic destruction of civilian populations to continue. The communication ended, and Korthok turned to his tactical officer. How do their numbers compare to our total fleet strength? Warprime, they outnumber us more than 4-1. Our combined forces throughout all conquered territories total approximately 900 vessels. Korthok felt something he had not experienced in decades of conquest. Genuine fear. But his pride and the reputation of the Dominion demanded that he respond to this unprecedented challenge. All ships, attack formation, he commanded. Their largest vessels first. Show these unknown aliens the price of defying the Zephyrian Dominion. The Zephyrian fleet moved forward in waves, their ships firing the moment they came within weapons range. Energy beams and explosive missiles filled the space. Between the two fleets, as 900 vessels launched everything they had at the human formation, Admiral Chen watched the incoming fire with professional interest. Defensive Pattern 7, he ordered calmly. Return fire authorized, but remember our rules of engagement. Disable, don't destroy, unless absolutely necessary. The human fleet's response was unlike anything Warprime Korthok had ever witnessed. Instead of the chaotic melee he expected, the human ships moved like parts of a vast machine. They flowed around the Zephyrian attack formations with precision that seemed impossible for such a large fleet. Small groups of human vessels worked together with seamless coordination, targeting specific systems on Zephyrian ships with surgical precision, where the Dominion forces expected devastating counterattack. They found their weapons disabled and their engines crippled, but their life support systems carefully preserved. What are they doing? Korthok demanded, as he watched his ships being systematically neutralized without being destroyed. They're disabling our vessels, Warprime, his tactical officer reported in amazement. They're targeting weapons and propulsion systems while leaving crew compartments intact. Captain Sarah Martinez commanded the destroyer group that engaged the Zephyrian's second battle line. Her 12 ships moved through the enemy formation like skilled surgeons, each vessel covering the others while they struck at predetermined targets. Remember, she broadcast to her crews, "We're here to stop a war, not commit genocide. Disable and capture people. These are someone's sons and daughters, even if they're on the wrong side." The precision of the human attack was devastating in its effectiveness. Zephyrian ships found their weapon systems severed by focused energy beams, their engines destroyed by targeted explosions, and their shields overwhelmed by coordinated strikes. But in every case, human forces took care to preserve crew compartments and life support systems. Warprime Korthok watched in growing horror as his mighty fleet was dismantled piece by piece. Ships that had conquered star systems were reduced. 2 helpless hulks within minutes of engaging the human forces. But more disturbing than the tactical defeat was the realization that the humans were holding back. Warprime, his sensor officer, called out, "The enemy is deploying rescue vessels to assist our disabled ships." Korthok stared at his displays in complete confusion. Human medical ships were moving between the disabled Zephyrian vessels, offering aid to the crews. Enemy forces were saving the lives of soldiers who had been trying to kill them moments before. Admiral Chen opened a communication channel to the Zephyrian command ship. "Warprime Korthok, your fleet has been neutralized. I am offering you the opportunity to surrender with honor. Your wounded will receive medical attention, and your crews will be treated according to galactic conventions." Korthok looked around his bridge at officers who had never experienced defeat, their faces showing the same shock and confusion he felt. The humans had destroyed his fleet while actively trying to preserve the lives of his soldiers. "Why?" asked, his voice barely audible. "Why did you not destroy us all? Your victory would have been complete." Admiral Chen's expression softened slightly. "Because Warprime, we didn't come here to destroy anyone. We came here to stop the destruction of innocent people. Your soldiers are not our enemies. Your actions are." Aftermath of the battle brought revelations that shook the foundations of galactic politics. As human medical teams worked alongside Kalhari survivors to treat wounded Zephyrian soldiers, word of the engagement spread throughout the galaxy at the speed of thought. On the crystal world of Zarian Prime, the Galactic Senate convened an emergency session. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss the implications of humanity's military intervention in the Kalahari system. Senator Vex-9, crystalline being whose light-based communication created rainbow patterns in the chambers. Atmosphere called for order among the assembled delegates. Fellow beings, the senator's translated voice echoed through the vast hall. We are here to address a development that fundamentally alters our understanding of galactic power structures. The evidence was undeniable. Holographic recordings from the battle showed the true scope of human military capability. 4,000 ships had appeared as if from nowhere, defeated a fleet that had conquered multiple star systems, and then proceeded to provide medical aid to their defeated enemies. Ambassador Thane stood before the assembly, their blue skin still, bearing the marks of their recent ordeal, but their voice strong and clear. Honored delegates, I come before you not just as a representative of the Kalahari Republic, but as a witness to something that challenges everything we thought we knew about warfare. Chamber fell silent as Thane continued. 23 species refused to aid my people when we faced extinction. 23 civilizations turned away from our pleas for help, citing the strength of our enemies and the danger to themselves. Only one species responded to our call. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as delegates absorbed the implications of Thane's words. The humans did not just send us the token force we had desperately hoped for, Thane said, their voice rising with emotion. It revealed military capabilities that dwarf anything we believed possible in this region of space. And they used that overwhelming power not for conquest or revenge, but for mercy. A delegate from the Andromedan Collective, previously considered one of the galaxy's major military powers, stood to address the chamber. Ambassador Thane, our intelligence estimates suggest that what the humans deployed represents only a fraction of their total military strength. If this is accurate, we are looking at a species whose fleet size exceeds the combined navies of the next 10 largest military powers. Thane nodded solemnly. That is correct, Delegate 07. Admiral Chen informed me that their intervention fleet represented approximately 15% of humanity's total military capability. The chamber erupted in shocked discussions. If the humans possessed nearly 30,000 ships, they had effectively been concealing the largest military force in known galactic history while presenting themselves as a minor species. The question before us, Senator Vex-9 said, calling for order, is what this means for galactic stability. Are the humans a threat to existing power structures, or are they something else entirely? Back in the Kalahari system, the answer to that question was becoming clear through human actions. Rather than words, Admiral Chen supervised the massive humanitarian operation that followed the military victory. Human ships worked alongside surviving Kalahari vessels to evacuate civilians from the damaged worlds, while others began the process of extinguishing the fires that raged across 2 planets. Warprime Korthok, now a prisoner aboard the Terra's Resolve, found himself in the unique position of being treated better by his captors than by his own superiors during many Zephyrian military campaigns. Human medical teams had treated his injuries without question, and he had been provided with quarters that were comfortable by any species standards. I don't understand your people, Korthak said during one of his daily conversations with Admiral Chen. The reptilian commander sat across from the human admiral in a conference room that served as an informal meeting space. Chen sipped his coffee, a human beverage that Korthak had grown curious about. What specifically confuses you, Warprime? Your soldiers risk their lives to save my troops. Your medical teams work as hard to heal Zephyrian wounded as they do your own. You have the power to conquer half the galaxy, but instead, you use it to build hospitals on worlds that tried to kill your people. Korthak's yellow eyes showed genuine bewilderment. In Zephyrian culture, such behavior would be seen as weakness. In human culture, Chen replied thoughtfully, we learned that the strongest position is often the one that doesn't require you to prove your strength. True power is having the ability to destroy your enemies and choosing not to. Korthak considered this for a long moment. Your species has been planning this revelation for years, hasn't it? This wasn't a spontaneous response to the Kalahari crisis. Chen nodded. Humanity has been preparing for our formal introduction to galactic politics since first contact. We knew that eventually we would need to show our true capabilities. The Kalahari situation provided the right context. Right context? Situation where our strength would be revealed through an act of mercy rather than aggression. We wanted the galaxy to understand that human military power exists to protect, not to conquer. 3 months after the battle, Ambassador Thane delivered their final report to the Galactic Senate. The chamber was packed beyond capacity as beings from across the galaxy gathered to hear the official account of humanity's intervention. Reconstruction of our worlds proceeds ahead of schedule, Thane reported. Thanks to human engineering capabilities that match their military prowess. But more importantly, the Zephyrian prisoners of war have become active participants in the rebuilding effort. This revelation caused another stir among the delegates. The idea of former enemies voluntarily participating in reconstruction was almost as shocking as the original military intervention. War Prime Korthok has formally requested that his remaining forces be allowed to join the effort to repair the damage they caused. Thane continued. This transformation occurred not through force or coercion, but through witnessing human behavior during their captivity. Senator Vexanine's crystalline form brightened with curiosity. Ambassador, what specific human behaviors had this effect? Thane smiled, an expression that had become much more common since their rescue. The humans treated their prisoners exactly as they treated their own wounded. Zephyrian soldiers received the same medical care, the same quality food, the same respect for their dignity as human personnel. Many of them had never experienced such treatment, even from their own commanders. The impact of these revelations spread far beyond the Senate chamber. Throughout the galaxy, species that had previously dismissed humanity as insignificant began reassessing their diplomatic relationships. Trade agreements that had heavily favored other species were quietly renegotiated. Military alliances were reconsidered in light of humanity's revealed capabilities. But perhaps the most significant change was in how conflicts were resolved. The Kalahari precedent, as it became known, established a new model for intervention. In galactic disputes, several species began requesting human mediation in their conflicts, hoping to achieve resolution without the massive casualties that traditional warfare usually produced. Admiral Chen returned to Earth 6 months after the intervention, where he was greeted not as a conquering hero, but as a diplomat who had successfully introduced humanity to the galactic community on their own terms. In his final report to the Terran Defense Council, he summarized the mission's impact with characteristic understatement. The deployment achieved all primary objectives, he wrote. The Kalahari Republic has been preserved as an independent species. The Zephyrian Dominion has ceased aggressive expansion and entered into peace negotiations. Most importantly, humanity has established its position in the galactic community as a species whose strength serves peace rather than conquest. The galaxy had learned that the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't a species that conquered through fear or dominated through cruelty. It was a species that could choose mercy when holding overwhelming power, because such a choice transformed enemies into allies and turned military victory into lasting peace. In the years that followed, the phrase human intervention became synonymous with conflicts resolved through strength guided by compassion. The galaxy had found its protectors, and they wore their power like a shield rather than a sword. Ambassador Thane, now serving as the Kalahari representative to Earth, often reflected on the desperate message they had sent into the void, hoping for even the smallest gesture of support. What they had received instead was a revelation that mercy, when backed by unshakable strength, could reshape the very fabric of galactic civilization. The universe was a safer place because humanity had chosen to be its guardians. And perhaps most remarkably, they had made that choice not in spite of their power, but because of how they chose to use it.